I always tell my staff that when you open champagne, it should sound like a sophisticated woman farting. That's the way I train.
Welcome to the first episode of Bring Your Own. I'm Derek Morrison. In each episode, we'll gather a small group of wine lovers, each bringing their own perspectives, experience, and a special bottle of wine from their own cellar to share. For our first episode, we've arranged a great panel of champagne lovers to chat about grower champagne and share their stories and insights about these wines and the people behind them. Grower champagnes are produced by the same estate that owns the vineyards where the grapes are grown. In contrast, large champagne houses buy most of their grapes from many different growers and work to blend their wines to achieve the same taste year after year. Both groups are important to the region, but hopefully this episode will shed light on what is so exciting about grower champagnes in the market today. We are really excited to have a great group of champagne lovers. Sandia Chang, owner of Bubbledogs in central London, Peter Crawford, one of Europe's most passionate champagne collectors, and David Clawson, owner of The Remedy Wine Bar. The good people at Wilton's in Mayfair were kind enough to host us in their beautiful private dining room. Find them online at www.wiltons.co.uk. Follow us on social media at BYO Podcast and share this episode for the chance to win some great prizes. And subscribe to the podcast to make sure you catch all future episodes. So why don't we start off by going around the table a little bit and just introducing each other, and if saying a little bit about where you're from, what you do.
You're looking at me, so I presume I should start. So my name is David, and I own a little wine bar called The Remedy. We've been open a few years now. We're not champagne specialists per se, but we have I think a nice little interesting list. We tend to do a lot of different kind of wines, a lot of natural wines, but we're not really dogmatic either. And I guess I got into wine, well, obviously probably like a lot of us by drinking a lot of it. And yeah, I had a prior life, which maybe over 4 or 5 bottles of champagne I might discuss, but I'm much happier in my current life. And that obviously revolves a lot around wine.
Sandia.
Yes. Well, I think I kind of know everybody here, but I'm Sandia. I own a champagne and hot dog bar called Bubbledogs. So we specialize in grower champagne, which when I first opened the restaurant was kind of a hard feat to overcome, where everybody in London was drinking, Paul Roger's and Veuve Clicquot's and whatnot, and people were just like, "What do you sell?" But yeah, it's been good. It's been great, and I think with especially David's just down the street from us, with people like him, it's really helping the whole entire culture of wine drinkers in London moving forward.
When did you open Bubbledogs, Cindy?
2012. Yeah, I mean my whole career.
Incredible.
Yes. What, so
5 years ago. It's really weird.
It's crazy.
It seems like yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Well, sometimes it feels like forever. The life of a restaurant owner.
I know that feeling too.
You know what?
I'm only 3 years in.
But I've always been in the restaurant business. I went to school to study restaurant management. Went to culinary school because I thought I wanted to be a chef. Then thought that was a stupid idea. And then just got into wines and loved it ever since.
I'm Peter. I do not work in the wine trade at all. I am a physiotherapist by trade. But I've loved champagne from first going to uni. And I got into it, I was working in Oddbins back in 1999, just when the wine world was starting to have its explosion in terms of pricing. And I was asked to look after a section. And the section I had to look after was champagne. And I remember a friend who hopefully will grace this table at some point, Richard Bray, came round and he brought a bottle of 88 Paul Roger, and I'd never had a champagne like that before, and it was just one of those moments where I was just, this is incredible. And it seems so bizarre because it's only, 11 years old at that point, and now, my experience now of what I classify as old champagne is way beyond that, but it was just such an amazing experience to get that little bit of aging, and just see what champagne can do and what you get on the palate, and I've just been in love ever since.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with an 88 Krug.
Oof.
That was, it was just like,
yeah.
All of a sudden, like...
It's such a great vintage.
It's
like,
such what's going on here,
vintage.
This is not what I normally drink.
No?
And unfortunately, I don't drink that every day, but, every once in a while.
Yeah, it's really for me, the great vintage of the last 50 or so years.
I'm Derek Morrison. I work with a good wine shop we have 2 retail shops in West London, one in Kew Gardens and one in Chiswick. I'm originally from Saskatchewan, Canada, so it's a career in wine kind of forced me abroad pretty quickly. But I got into wine. I originally moved to Italy to make cheese, and in Umbria, and I moved to Italy to write a book and make cheese and cook, and I just ended up falling in love with wine after spending some time with some winemakers in Umbria and Montefalco, and for me that kind of just set me off down the rabbit hole. And I ended up coming to London so I could maintain kind of access to the European wines. And Italy is where I kind of had my champagne epiphanies, where it was I didn't know what grower champagne was when I moved to be honest, I didn't really know much about Italian wine, but I always joke with people that the only thing Italians can agree upon when it comes to wine is champagne. No matter what region you go to in Italy, you can find phenomenal champagne lists. And one of my sommelier teachers from when I went to culinary school in Piemonte had a great, he was fascinated with the wines of Risleus and drinking with winemakers in Barolo. I got to drink a lot of great wines. So it was where I met the wines from Francis Boulard, which ended up becoming one of my favorite Les Rochers. It was one of my wedding wines, one of my wedding champagnes as well. But so that I moved to the UK to maintain access to the wines of Europe.
I think it's crazy though. Actually, I mean, I've been to Piedmont several times, and some of the best champagne lists I've seen are in Piedmont.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Because winemakers love to drink champagne.
Yeah, this is my restaurant thing kicking in. I don't like seeing empty glasses.
Yeah, okay.
So everybody brought a bottle of wine tonight to contribute that hopefully means a little bit of something, or to yourselves, or you've got hopefully some insights as to why that bottle that you chose tonight. That's what I'm curious to know. So let's start with Sandia, see what you've got.
So I picked Marie-Courtin, which is a female wine producer in Champagne. I wanted to showcase a female producer because there's very few around, and also the particular area that it comes from. I always tell my staff that when you open Champagne, it should sound like a sophisticated woman farting. That's the way I train. I really enjoy this area because not a lot of people know it's from the O, so south of Champagne, actually closer to Chablis than it is to Champagne itself. But yeah, this is Concordance is her 100% Pinot Noir that is no sulfur added. This is a 2012 vintage. I remember the first time I had this, I was just like, it smells like Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
So, Sandy, I want to ask you a bit about Bubbledogs. So 5 years ago, I mean, that's pretty bold to go full exclusively grower champagnes in 2012.
It was.
What was the
Was
motivation?
I thinking?
Yeah,
What
basically.
were you thinking? Well, I was just the previous place I worked at was Noma before I came to the UK, and it was a revelation to see their wine list because they wrote their wine list based on what they were serving in the restaurant. So they had no New World wines, they had no Bordeaux's, no Spanish reds. Everything was just written for their food. And I was like, that's amazing. You know, for a restaurant to be so ballsy and be like, I don't care what our guest wants. I'm representing our restaurant and writing a list just for our restaurant. And I thought it was amazing. So it was there where I learned all about the grower producers. We had an amazing list. I still think to this day, Noma probably has the best grower champagne list. They just have more access in Scandinavia. I think that's where all the allocation goes.
I know, so not fair. Everything was
To
in Copenhagen.
Denmark. Yeah.
Or Japan.
And then Italy. But I wanted to, I came back here and I was missing that. I was missing drinking grower champagnes. And I was also missing the New York City vibe where things didn't have to be formal. Even a champagne bar shouldn't have to be formal. So I thought, well, why not create something that's super cool and relaxed, but you're drinking amazing champagne. And I personally love champagne with French fries and charcuterie.
Yes, I mean, but I think one of the greatest food pairings is great wine with simple but good food.
Yeah, I think that's how we all normally live. Everybody normally lives like that. Exactly. Nobody has trolleys of caviar in their house when they pop up a bottle of champagne.
Cue the oysters.
Exactly. Please, somebody do it.
But yeah, that was the whole idea, is to create a place where people can actually feel comfortable coming into a champagne bar to drink champagne and not feel that sort of stuffiness of, I was going to say velvet couches, but we're sort of
Sitting on velvet couches.
and and like crystal chandeliers and whatnot.
Well, were there any other places doing, like restaurants doing much grower champagne back then? I can't remember.
No, I think Texture had a little bit. But I remember starting out and working with suppliers like Vine Trail, and they had very, very little. They had a great portfolio, but their stock was so little. They were running out. I had for some crazy idea, I opened the restaurant with Benoit Lahaye's Rosé by the glass. And like literally 2 months later, they're like, sorry, we don't have any more.
You sold it all, darn it.
Yeah, and it was very hard to come by.
So is that how you started getting into buying direct? I mean, did you have relationships with some of these producers already, or were you like,
No,
I need to lock down supply, and it was kind of more of a necessity predicated?
It was a little bit of both. It was one of the reasons why I brought Marie-Courtin, because I'd never been to Champagne until a month before I opened the restaurant. I've never actually stepped foot in Champagne. So I took a trip there, and Marie-Courtin was one of the first producers I went to visit.
Sorry, so you opened a Champagne bar, and you'd never been to Champagne?
No, I did, because
So cool.
I did a month before.
A month before, yeah.
I did.
Good homework. That's good.
But I met a lot of producers while I was working, and I was quite
course,
fortunate
yeah.
to work at Per Se too in New York, where we had access to a lot of producers and wines. But when I met her, and I was like, wow, this is completely different than what I thought Champagne would be. I thought everybody would be in suits and, great huge mansions. And this little lady comes out with like the most gnarliest like farmer's hands I've ever seen. And I was just like, man, she is cool.
That's so cool.
And she's just walking around her vineyard picking up weeds and, making me smell her dandelion flowers that are growing. And it was just the most amazing experience. And and from then on, every year I used to go back 3 or 4 times and just keeping up relationships, and that's how the direct became.
How many people do you buy direct from?
About 8 of them now.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
It definitely helps supply, probably.
Suppliers.
Or allocation.
Yeah, allocations is much better if I buy direct, because then I get my own private allocation, which is probably a lot of times the same as the whole of England's allocation.
I don't want to hear this.
What did you expect? Did you expect more people to come for the champagne, or is it kind of the idea? How did you convert hot dog? How do you convert hot dog lovers into grower fanatics, or are they just kind of oblivious to the fact of what they're supporting?
Well, the restaurant itself lends to forcing people to drink the champagne, because there's nothing else on the list. There's no other thing you can. Well, there's a couple beers and cocktails, but that's it. So you're sort of forcing them to try. But because hot dogs are just so friendly, they're like the most friendly food. People are never intimidated by a hot dog.
Yeah.
But that's what I love. Champagne is like the most vulnerable, volatile, kind of humble wine region in many ways, from the vigneron perspective, in terms of there's no more difficult place really to grow grapes. I mean, so I think there's a real charm and kind of enchanting thing about that from the growers.
And they're very good at presenting that. The growers. This is fantastic. Rock up on the door. They're drinking tea with their wife or husband or whatever, and it's just this little farmer, and they're tending to their grapes, and it's usually, I can't remember how many hectares.
2.5.
Yeah, I mean 2.5 hectares. It's just tiny.
Yeah.
Tiny, and they're trying things out. You say this is sans soufre.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying things out that's incredibly volatile. This is testy stuff to do. Most producers in most countries would just go, not touch it with a barge pole. And then she's got 2.5 hectares, and she's going, I'll tell you what, let's just roll the dice on this.
No, actually, that's even more amazing, because it's such a small production, and to take the risk when she knows she can sell her champagne at X price no matter what, because it's champagne, right?
And also, not even that. I think it's what I hadn't really realized until recently. I mean, you read it, but until you start to speak with some of the growers to really understand. I mean, the price to sell your grapes, it's one of the best places to just grow fruit and sell fruit. I mean, you basically have unchecked, you grow high yields, you get like €7 a kilo for your fruit, which is huge. I mean, you have to take a lot of financial sacrifice and risk just to make your own wine. I think, and not only with the time it takes to produce a bottle and then release it. I mean, these are really kind of like the martyrs and kind of heroes for me of like, I think that's part of what started to fuel my obsession with grower champagne. It was just not only for me, the quality and value and interest in kind of the stories behind the wines, but the actual perseverance and principled approach and the dedication you have to have just to create it, as opposed to saying, yeah, but I could make 6 figures as a grower selling my grapes and just compromising the integrity of the vineyard and maximizing my profits. And that's kind of this
add-on story to that. Because I was in Champagne last week and visiting a couple growers, one of which is probably actually one of the larger grower producers, Ambonnay. But still, I mean, they are a grower Champagne producer. And they, on all their vineyards, they basically use Massel selection. So, they take cuttings from their best vines and they replant them as it goes. And there's a really good allegory or, story about, the next generation. And it says, when we do Massel selection cutting, we do it, we plant it. It takes, 3 years to produce any fruit. And then they start making some champagne from it. Then they're gonna age it for whatever period of time, blah, blah, blah. So basically from the day they select the vine they want to use as a cutting, it takes 15 years to actually taste what that vine will produce. Yeah. It's like, that's crazy. Yeah. I mean, that is like bonkers long time for, an investment, as it were, into what they do. And I think that's the thing that's so impressive. Yeah,
that's 10% as old as Canada. So just put it into my context. 150-year-old, Canada just did their 150th birthday as like obviously, I mean, the continent and First Nations peoples of Canada have been there a lot longer than 150 years. But it's just a really sobering contextual thing for me to think about coming from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. It's like 15 years to taste it, that's like 10%.
Well, I think it's always funny, like, a lot of us, except for Peter, come from the New World, right? And like, you get like...
Scotland's kind of New World.
I love that. That's sort of true, in an old world kind of way. The concept of old vines in the New World is like, these are 30 years old.
A friend of mine makes a phenomenal Riesling in the Okanagan Valley, and it's bottled as Old Vines Riesling, and it's like, 35, maybe 40-year-old vines now. It's really good wine. It's just, people are like, oh wow, old vines. You start to think like, was it like 90-year-old? No, 35. Like,
planted in 1980.
So Peter, can you tell us about the wine you brought tonight?
Yeah, so this is Fred Savart's Expression Rosé Brut Nature from 2012. I completely fell in love with this wine when I first tried it. 100% Pinot Noir from Écoeil, 3 small Ludi. It's 0 grams per litre, so no sugar at all, although it's got so much residual sugar in it anyway, it's pretty intense. And I've had it a number of times, and every single time it has this incredible way of gripping you. It's beautifully elegant yet intense. It's got all the things I love about grower champagne, and especially so young. It's a 2012, so it's still fresh and young, but has so much going for it. It's a cracking wine.
Had another interesting conversation actually in Champagne, again with Didier Gimenez, about the crown caps, right? And most people use crown caps in the aging period, right? And there's no reason you couldn't use it once you sell it.
Well,
except that it's not allowed.
It's not allowed. I tell you what, we had a horizontal of 82s and 79s at the Champagne Week, and they were all disgorged onto crown caps, and they were mind-blowing. Oh, were you there?
No.
Oh,
no.
God, it was incredible.
Well, Didier said
so fresh.
Yeah, he said he did lots of tests with cork versus crown cap in long term after it's been disgorged, but still put it in crown cap back on it.
Was that with Geoffroy?
No, it was with all the special club.
Oh.
It was phenomenal. Apart from taking the crown caps off, which was hilarious. It's like a beer on acid, just like pow, and these crown caps hitting the ceiling.
That makes for a bigger, better party.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how men fart.
This wine just completely blew me away, and it's just got so much tension, so much lovely salinity, just gripping, and 2012. Oh, it's incredible.
Wow.
It's just making me salivate just thinking about it.
I mean, it's really exuberant, but it's framed by such lovely, like you say, salinity and minerality.
It's kind of like really kind of a contrast on the nose. It's got this really perfumed elegance, but then it's also got this power at the same time. I mean, it's really like...
I haven't tasted it yet. I can't get over it. It's such an amazing nose.
Yeah, to me that nose is everything I love about what the growers movement is doing. This intense fruit, that salinity and the elegance, and it's all kind of pieced together. It's fantastic.
So tense on the palate. I mean, because it's really quite rich and expressive and on the nose, but then on the palate, it's just so precise and saline, as you say. But like, and the finish is really gripping.
Yeah, it kind of it smells very sweet on the nose, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, but not at all on the palate.
Yeah, it's Brut Nature.
Yeah.
Brut Nature. This is going to be the last year he's going to be able to come along to these tastings now.
Well, and so actually, that's a good segue into one of the things I wanted to ask you, because what do you think is? I think it's always dangerous to get into the grower house debate. I mean, because I think it's obviously a much more complex tapestry in Champagne than growers versus houses, right?
Yes,
I mean,
true.
a good example is Alexander Filane, Fabrice Gass's wines. He only has 1.5 hectares, and he works for Bollinger. I mean, he still works for Bollinger. He used to work for Bollinger.
He still does, yeah.
I mean, it's essentially working for one of the most iconic Grand Marques that allows him to subsidize and kind of do his little hobby project, right? I mean, it's not his sole income, and that's a good example of kind of it's not such a black and white competitive world, and even the growers would say themselves that it's not.
No.
But he's starting to buy grapes for Overture, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he's moving over to NM to do exactly that, and I think we'll see a load of this generation doing exactly the same thing. I imagine Peters will do the same thing.
Baresh has done that.
Yeah, Baresh has done it with his NM brand with his brother, and I just think it's the natural next step. You look at Roederer, and they're the classic example. Roederer is the classic grower NM, where everything they produce, apart from their bog standard, Brut Premier, is their own grapes, or are their own grapes. So, and it's really fascinating when you go and speak to them about it, because you for some reason, I still, even having drunk so much of it, I still just think of them as one of the big brands, but they are just a grower that has a set amount of grapes that they buy for their Brut Premier, and it's.
Do you think that it's going to be more people, say, changing how they grow their grapes and who they sell them to, as opposed to expand that production? Or what do you see the role of it? What do you think it's going to be 30 years from now? What do you think the role will be of, say, people like Savart, and how will that transform the relationship between small vignerons and the Grand Marques? I
think we're going through a very interesting stage right now where the consumer, with Bubbledogs, you've got a fantastic way to introduce people to grower champagnes, but the reality is it still represents such a tiny fraction of sales.
Yes.
And I think the reality is it's going to continue to be a tiny fraction of the sales, and NMs and the marketing machines of Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, and the like will continue to push 95% of the sales. What's really fascinating, I think we're going through right now, is the transition from the post-war babies coming through, post-war babies dying off or handing over, and what we're experiencing now, which is a sudden boom in a different expression of what we see in Champagne, and that's really fascinating. But I honestly don't think it's going to change much in the way of what we see delivered on the shelves. I think it'll just be a phase which we, as a four, and hopefully a few others who watch this, will take on and realise that you can get incredible products, amazing wines, if you can find it.
I wanted to make the parallel between Henri Jaillet and Cros Parent II and the great growers now. Whereas how much is the terroir? We actually celebrate the terroir, or is it these people are really just quite special? Yeah. Both. I mean, midwives of their terroir.
I think great wine is always both.
Yeah, I think great wine is always both, and I think this is a prime example. Écueil is not a celebrated village in Champagne. I think it has become a lot more celebrated, obviously, with the likes of wines like this and many others from around that area. But I think more of the status of Champagne has become about the individuals. Than anything else. I think
grower champagne is a lot like restaurants like Noma or El Bulli, or the top 50 restaurants of the world, where only a certain amount of people in this world know that world, but there's majority of people are still eating at Pizza Express and those are the normal. The world will always be like that, I think.
But that being said, I mean, the three of us here who work in the trade, I think it's you, Peter.
You support our trade.
You support our trade.
We appreciate your patronage.
You know more than us, but anyways, it's like, okay, we have individual restaurants and wine shops, but we're all passionate about grower champagnes, and we're not the only ones. And okay, London, you might say, is a bit of a bubble in the UK, but nonetheless, there's a hell of a lot more grower champagne being sold to people now than there was 5 years ago.
But it's funny.
So I hope that does start to make a difference.
I think what Sandia said is very true. But then your Bubbledogs is the kind of the counter movement to that. Whereas you create a cool environment for people to come and have a great meal and experience, and they just happen to be drinking great grower champagne, supporting great grower champagne. They don't need to know anything about like what we've obsessed about with it, but they're still supporting that. And that's kind of what I found with retail at the Grower Champagne Month. As I said, if we can just get these wines in front of people, they'll taste them, they like them, they buy them. They don't need to know that everything about the grower or that person, but they can still support it without having to buy into the whole tapestry, I guess. Right?
No, I agree with that, but one of the major issues we've got, and going on from what you're saying there, is you just can't get this wine.
No, yeah.
And that's and that's the troubling balance between all of these. Is that this is a single barrel, I think, a single barrel. So 400 odd bottles or so. It's such tiny productions, and we can get excited about it. You can probably get a case of 6 in your shop, and you sell it to your favorite clients because that's what you want to do, because you want to get them back in the shop, and they love it, and then they come back to you the next week and they can't get it, so they disengage from the process because it's disappointing, and
yeah, that's true. But I think now we're in a really great era where there's that can segue into the next producer. There's so many great people to engage with, and there's with the vintage variation and different albums coming out each year from each artist, right? So hopefully it's more of a journey. And what I love about the grower champagnes is people who drink grower champagnes are generally they're appreciating it in the same way we appreciate other wines, right? Whereas if we're gifting some Grand Marque, and this is a bit of a generalization, I know that, but when most people are buying champagne, they're not buying it as a wine in the UK necessarily, or they're not consuming it as their daily wine. Whereas the rate of consumption with these wines, we're always looking for the next one to try. So I think we consume them more regularly than people who are having a bottle of Bollinger.
To me, maybe one of the problems with the grower champagne movement is, certain movements in wine, the regular wine, certain producers become very cult and sought after, and then everyone wants those handful of producers, even though there's a whole breadth of great growers out there that are just not really well known. Yeah. But everyone is so obsessed with I have to have Solos, I have to have Prévost, I have to have whoever, and that and so then it's people fighting, and then there's not enough around to go around, and then maybe some of the other growers kind of get forgotten a little bit.
Yeah, I sort of boycotted Solos on my list now, because I think
we just can't afford it.
Yeah, well, one, you can't afford it, and then you feel like you're trying to sell yourself to get some. It's the hardest thing to get, and then you put it on the list because you buy it so expensive. You have to mark it up, and all of a sudden it's the most expensive thing on your list. But then next to it are people like Ulysse Colon or Chantal who's trained under him, and just as good, but like an eighth of the price.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think, it's just a evolution of anything. New people, old people go out and new people come in. And
one of the things I think is so amazing about champagne, grower champagnes or, Grand Marques, whatever, any champagne, is just so much goes into the making of champagne. The growing of the grapes, of course, but then and there's so many different ways that you can make a champagne, basically, and each way has a unique signifier on the wine.
Yeah, exactly.
So Derek, tell us what you brought.
So I brought I brought a bottle of the 2002 Hubert Paulet Cuvée Risleus. I've been working with this wine for about 5 years, and I just learned how to pronounce the name of the cuvée.
Are you sure that's right? Yeah.
So Risleus is the name of the cuvée. I'm from Saskatchewan. I can't not pronounce that S, so I've been calling it Risleus 2002 for the entire time I've worked with it. So it's the Cuvée Risleus, which is derived from the old name of Rilly, in Rilly-la-Montagne, where the estate is, which is Risleus. So you can understand maybe my confusion over the correct pronunciation of the wine.
Could you go through that all again?
Risleus. Risleus. The Risleus is, I think it's kind of like 57% between Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and then the rest Chardonnay. But it's his top cuvée. It's Foudre age, and this is quite recently released. It's like 13 years on the lees. Disgorged in like late 15, I think it was. So,
does he do several disgorgements?
Yeah. I don't know how much he has of this wine. It's kind of like sitting, like I don't know. I just keep buying too much of it because it's so good, and I'm afraid it's going to be gone. Because I mean, 02, obviously. I mean, like it's kind of hard to make a bad wine in 02, and I just think this wine is stunning, impeccable value. This is kind of the inspiration for Grower Champagne Month, to be honest. A friend of mine imports these wines, and I drank them in Italy. I worked with them in Canada, and then I was looking for them to bring them into the shops in the UK, and I couldn't believe that they weren't in the UK. So I asked my friend who imports them. I said, who's importing his wines? He said, nobody. And I said, oh my God, we have to get these in. So we started working with him and a couple other producers, Vernier-Fagnier and Michel Arnoux, that we started buying direct. And that was kind of the inspiration for us to do our first kind of small-scale Grower Champagne Month last year. Was I said, I love Olivier's wines. I think they're really exciting, and he's a really soft-spoken, quiet guy. So it was really, really felt a good passion to be an ambassador for his wines in the UK. And we thought, let's do a festival. Let's let's launch our new champagne range. Because I always thought, for a long time, I used to work at Hedonism, a really amazing trophy room of champagnes in terms of like old vintage Grand Marque wines, and really just trophy upon trophy. But as a passionate grower champagne lover, I was always left wanting for more of what we had in that selection, and you can't have everything. So when I went with the Good Wine Shop, I was really passionate to the owner. I said, Marcus, I really want us to. There wasn't really much going on in retail, to be honest, with grower champagne in the last few years. So we thought, what better way to launch these producers, or especially Hubert, Paulet, who hadn't been in the UK before, than by launching a new retail selection and cracking open Prévost and every other great grower that already had a bit of reputation, and put the Risleus next to it and say, look, this wine belongs on this table.
Maybe a slightly tangential thought, but going back to a bit about the future of the grower champagnes and stuff, and I was just thinking about how what's so cool about grower champagnes is like passion they inspire. I mean that's clear on all of us here, and that's the kind of thing that helps to sell wine, obviously, but to get other people interested. And the fact that you and Sandia, you're bringing in grower champagnes that are maybe not already here, and it's just our place, like I said, we're not specialists in champagne. We love it and we do it. We've always been just a wine bar, and we kind of do a lot of natural wines. Natural wines can be a bit more controversial than, say, grower champagnes, but what is interesting in comparison is that they inspire a lot of passion, and that whether you like it or not, that passion has translated into I think an awareness, and so I think the same thing will happen and is happening in grower champagnes, and it's just you hope that passion kind of like then there's maybe more people who come into vignerons who come into wanting to take over their family's domain or whatever and want to make more their own champagnes, and then it kind of builds on itself. I don't know if that's true, will happen or not, but.
So David, do you want to tell us a little bit about the champagne you brought tonight?
Absolutely. So I brought another very tiny grower producer called Marie-Noelle Ledru. She's based in Ambonnay, which is, I think, it's considered one of the great villages in Champagne, especially for Pinot Noir. And I mean, she really is, micro, négoce, hands-on. The history is she took over in the 80s from her parents, and she started making the champagnes, and back in the day I think they had anywhere from between 7 to 10 hectares. It kind of varies by who you speak to, but through some, shall we say, family disagreements, those how many hectares went down to pretty much under 2 now. So she really is a tiny producer, like Courtin, and her champagnes have become. How's that, Sandia?
Nicely done.
Very sophisticated fart. Aristocratic even.
What I think is really amazing about her champagnes is they really encapsulate this combination of both power and finesse. And I don't know if it's something to do with being a female winemaker, but there is a real elegance as well to her champagnes, even though they have that body and power to them. And so this is a 2002 vintage, which again is, as you said, quite a tasty vintage. I mean, I think 99% of people who buy champagne would never even think to decant champagne. But in fact, it actually, I would say this should be decanted.
Yeah,
I mean, this is really quite closed. And it's got kind of crazy. Like, why are you going to pour? You're going to lose the bubbles or whatever. But it really can make a big difference.
And it would make a huge difference for that, because for me, the first note you grasp on the nose is the fact that it's aged, and you get that little bit of age, and decanting just wipes that away, just wipes it, and you start afresh almost. It's just starting to lift.
I mean, it's definitely one that I would decant. So I think this is interesting. The Paulet, they use barrels, right? You said?
Yeah, but he's not using new barrels. And as most of the growers, I guess probably we should talk about tasting. He's using some barrel for the oxidative effect on the wine. But yeah,
can you remember whether they're large barrels or not?
I think he's got he has foudres, and then he also has some smaller barrels that he does. I think it's a mix of both. I mean, you say they. I mean, it's literally like Olivier. I mean, he's a proper kind of like one-man band and like a couple employees. I had a chat with Peter, and he's like, the Champenois love their secrets, and he does a lot with Pinot Meunier, and that's one of the things I really like about his wines is that he's another one of these great growers that is also making amazingly unique wines from Pinot Meunier. And we've got Brochet, and we've got Benoit de Hue, Prévost. I mean, some of my favorite champagnes right now are just Pinot Meunier or Pinot Meunier dominant wines. Le Mont Benoit is like 60% Meunier, I think, from Brochet, and it's just stunning wine. You can't get enough of it. And so during the tasting, one of the people who was like, asked this question and said, you do so much great with Meunier. Have you thought about doing a 100% Pinot Meunier blend, a 100% Pinot Meunier release? And he's like, yeah, I have one. It's in bottle. It's going to be released in a year or two. And we're like, that's how I found out about this amazing new 100% Pinot Meunier, 100% Pinot Noir 04 that he's just sitting on and going to release. I'm like, oh, amazing. And so there I am asking, so when's it going to come out? How much can I get for an allocation kind of a thing? But it was had that question not come up, I don't know that he would have mentioned to me, oh, by the way, I have a new cuvée coming.
It's so much of the Champenois like that. It's hilarious. You walk around and you're like, this. I was with another producer just yesterday, and he was like, yeah, we made this Chardonnay back in 1990, and my father kept on making it the whole way through, but he never really needed to push the wines, so he never sold them. So they've got multiple vintages of Chardonnay all the way up, and then they decided to release the 07, which they released, which was fantastic. But a load of other vintages just not made. Not put released. On. Yeah, not released. Just sitting there. Why not?
For me, obviously the wine in the glass has to be inspiring, but I find these people just really fascinating and inspiring as well, right?
That's the best part of the best part of champagne is getting to know the people behind this. Like you look at this wine, but I know Fred, and it just makes me giggle when I drink this because I know Fred, And you drink this, and you're like, gosh, she's good. Damn it, what can I get more?
So one of the things that originally got me interested in grower champagne was the obvious immediate value relative to some of the Grand Marque champagnes. Do you think that's how crucial do you think that is, or do you think that's still relevant or important to grower champagne positioning in the marketplace now, or how do you think that connects?
When you go out and you buy a glass of Moet Chandon for £12, I think 80% of the money goes to their marketing budget rather than supporting whatever it takes to make that wine. With grower champagnes, I think you pay for what you get because they don't have a marketing team. It's usually the actual grower doing the marketing, and that's the reason why it sucks. Because they're farmers and not businessmen, you know.
Or you know, we've got two 2002s on the table, which is one of the most heralded vintages of the last 20 years, right? I mean, with Olivier Paulet, by virtue of I get to buy this wine because he doesn't have anybody out there selling his wine. It's him making the wine and kind of hanging out.
And I'm sure like that on a restaurant list is less than any of the 2002 vintage out there of Grand Marques.
Oh, totally. Both of these wines, I mean, I can't name, can you name a single Grand Marque Champagne 2002 less than 100 pounds other than Besserat?
No, and you can buy this for, I mean, retail, you know, somewhere between 50 to 100 pounds. And it, you know, is on the equivalent level to me of something like a Bollinger RD almost, and that's going to be double, triple the price.
Yeah, but all of these wines, I mean, these are all, I mean, objectively, I think these are all, you can say these are great, very good wine. I mean, these are, for me, I think the grower champagnes, the great grower champagnes, not every grower champagne, obviously, but the best examples of them, I think, are some of the most exciting wines in the world right now. And then when you factor in the price of what is the greatest examples of a region's wines and their price relative to, say, Burgundy or any other region in France, it's a fraction. I mean, the great wines of the world, all of these are well under 100 pounds a bottle. You know, and you know, Savart's, some of these cuvées, these producers all have wines around $40 pounds a bottle. Sorry. I don't know what Canadian dollars. It's like 800 Canadian dollars. Something.
And it's much more interesting. I mean, you pay, you know, I don't even know how much Moët Chandon Imperial costs on the shelves now, like 30, 35 pounds, whatnot. And you pay that much money and you get the same wine year after year after year. Like nothing changes. Like to me, that's so boring. Well, you can pay, you know, 30 pounds and get something different, and you get to taste the vintage, you get to taste the terroir, you get to taste, you know, the
people behind it.
Yeah, the life of that person in that year. They might be having a baby that year. It's stressful. You know, you get to taste everything.
All of these producers, Hubert Paulet, we're talking about his entry wines are, you know, same price as kind of Clicquot. But I think it's much more interesting, and I've become so fascinated with ownership of wines and where do the profits go. And for me, that was how, when I had to start choosing, we only have so much space on the shelf, and I eventually just weeded out so many Grand Marques. It's just because, look, at the end of the day, do I want the money that we spend on these wines to go pad a shareholder's dividends, or do we want it to go help put the kid through school, or, you know, whatever that person's family is? It's helping actually support a person that has a shared set of values with us, and I think our customers. And there's something that makes you feel good about that, I think.
Grower champagnes are artisanal wines, and that's it.
They're real people.
They're real people, yeah.
I think we should cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks
Cheers.
Thanks to you guys. Thanks to Wilton's for hosting us. It's been a great space, great hospitality, and great chats, great wines, most importantly.
Great wines.
Thank you.
Here.
We can keep drinking. Can we?
We certainly can.
Cut.